I'm Ted Conover. I'm a journalist and a writer of articles and books. I also teach journalism and writing at New York University's Carter Journalism Institute. Narrative journalism, I think, has a growing role in the total journalistic landscape here. One of my colleagues is Eliza Griswold, who has a new book about fracking in Pennsylvania, and she follows a family in a rural town called Amity, where people thought they'd make a lot of money from fracking, and then environmental consequences followed very quickly. Bad things happened to their water. You know, the earth starts shifting. A lot of government policies can be very effectively described using narrative techniques, finding people on the ground who are affected. And I'd say, as a journalist in New York City, I feel I see in the rise of Donald Trump a cautionary tale to journalists like us who have thought for a long time that the cities are the future and that international cooperation is the future, and fusion and growing together would be the direction we all move. And I think a lot of us feel we need to be paying more attention to people who feel left behind, not simply to racial minorities, which has been the focus of the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, but to angry people, sometimes working class, so that phrase is less current than it used to be. It seems you can speak fairly accurately of angry white rural Americans who helped propel Donald Trump to the presidency. And I think one reason that happened is we weren't always listening carefully enough to them. As far as accountability journalism, I feel that as an institution, American journalism has been politicized in at least a couple of ways. One is the fracturing of a middle ground, of a cultural consensus. We have extremes in the media now, and lots of fracture and lots of news tailored to political constituencies. That's all new, and it's grown more acute since Donald Trump became president. As a professor of journalism, I have always tried hard to keep party politics out of my teaching. I don't tell my students who I voted for. I don't praise the Democrats and damn the Republicans. But since Donald Trump became president and labeled the entire press the enemy of the American people, I feel we can no longer avoid teaching explicitly about politics sometimes, and also being more explicit about our own opinions. So yes, if a politician is against a free press, I'm going to speak out about that. Does it affect narrative journalism? I'm not sure. I imagine it must. That same video from Vice News about the Charlottesville protest comes to mind. You know, account of a protest is a story, and the challenges in covering it are a story. And so there's an early example of, yes, the narrative approach taking account of politics and trying to look at what's at stake in a protest like this, for our political life, our racial harmony, the idea of civil rights. There's a lot at stake in the world right now, and I think in the United States, we really feel that. It certainly has become more common in journalism as well, and I think particularly in narrative journalism, where the narrator is a character, right? Sort of a person who interacts with everybody and who can talk about how he's feeling, if something frightening happens or if there's a moment of insight. And I think, I wouldn't say it's changed a lot for me over time, because I'm lucky to have always been able to write in that voice, but I think for people starting out, it's easier to include themselves in their own perspective. Question of divided loyalties between, yes, how you feel about your readers and how you feel about your sources is a core concern of immersive writing. With regular journalism, you might be interviewing government officials who are interviewed twice a day, and they're quite used to this ritual. But for your immersive work, you're with somebody who never ever talks to a journalist and doesn't really know the downside of it, the potential downside. And you don't want to betray that person or make them regret their naivete. But it is a way in which I think immersive reporting is one of the most ethically challenging of all the kinds of reporting you can do, because I wouldn't say I become friends with my sources, that's a line I draw, but I grow close to them, and I know often people are trusting me in ways that I would not trust a journalist. And I feel I sometimes need to warn them. I need to say, look, remember, I'm writing about this. Or if I'm reporting secretly, I think, okay, we're gonna have to change their name because they just offered to sell me heroin, not knowing I'm a journalist, and that's not fair. Deciding how to render spoken speech is one of the great challenges of narrative journalism, and I guess it's almost universally agreed that we should have our people speak in ways that make sense. You don't want to repeat an ungrammatical phrasing that makes them look stupid and leaves the reader wondering what they were saying. That doesn't help anybody. But nor do you want to polish anybody's language into something it's not. And so there are all kinds of questions of class and appropriation in how speech is rendered that I don't have easy answers to. What I mainly worry about when I'm reporting is committing a sentence to paper before it's forgotten. If I'm ever doing surreptitious reporting, that's much harder, right? Because you can't pull out your notebook. You need to remember sentences for half an hour until you're in a private place and can close the bathroom door and write down. It's easy to think you'll need to know more than you will. In fact, if you're a new prison officer or a new food inspector, there's a lot you won't know. And you'll be the same as your coworker in that sense, unless she's from a family where everybody did that. You're going to be ignorant, and I think accepting ignorance is part of succeeding, and not also feeling you have to be somebody you're not. I really think it's almost impossible to be acting in any real way for any period of time. It's too exhausting. What I don't ever want to do is say something false or pretend I feel a way I don't. But I find that's not needed. You simply listen to people and ask sympathetic questions that would come from a friend rather than a policeman or a spy. And usually, in my experience, it works out. So I do work hard trying to get in another person's mind and understand what would scare them or where they would be suspicious, and so that I can avoid that place. Nonfiction writers, including journalists, have a lot to learn from fiction writers. I think fiction writers pay the most attention to language and are some of the best at telling stories. They have the advantage of being able to change the facts to suit their story, which I don't have as a nonfiction writer. But that doesn't mean I can't see how they begin a story, how they move in time, right? They flash back, they go forward, how they bring people together in conflict. Conflict is so interesting. So all those things, structure, characterization, setting scenes. Scenes are such an important building block of narrative writing, and fiction writers do a lot of the best work in that. So no, we have lots to learn from them. The message I would give to the student who wonders about the practicality of studying or reporting for a long piece, it's the same message I would give to my students at NYU, which is you're only going to be assigned a long story most likely if you've proved yourself with shorter ones, with most publications. That said, there's just a huge multiplicity, at least in English, of places to publish long-form work. Not all of them pay well, some don't pay at all, but if you're looking to establish a reputation as a writer who can do more than one thing, and you have a good idea, and you have a few free weekends where you could research it, maybe that's worth a try, you know? If you ever aspire to write a book, that would probably be a good thing to try. And even if you don't have that chance to immerse for 3 months or 6 months, I think paying attention to storytelling will help you write shorter stories better as well. Just the elements of storytelling, of conflict and pacing and beginning and end. So I think it's worth doing or practicing, even if you don't expect to be hired by the New Yorker.